Welcome to the Self-Storage Lab, where we deconstruct how operators are adapting to today's technology-driven landscape and how it might impact your business. In today's episode, we're diving back into the world of AI with all of the recent buzz over the last week. We'll explore the recent updates from Google's I.O. conference, OpenAI's product spotlight, and more. Join us as we dig into how the recent news will impact not just the tech landscape, but also how they could influence how you market and run your daily operations. All right, episode 21. Yeah, I think I want to start with just some of the recent announcements related to search. I think it's one of the topics which will probably have the highest and most, near-term impact. So during the Google I.O. conference, right, they unveiled AI overviews, right, which is previously known as Search Generative Experience, or SGE for short. They rebranded it to just AI Overview. For those of you guys they're not familiar, it's basically their way of integrating AI into search, and we'll talk about that broader topic here in a second. But it's essentially giving you the ability to, Google will now have the ability to summarize results and provide them at the top of the page with links for fact checking. I'm assuming many of you who use Google frequently have searched for a certain topic, and you might have started seeing snippets. It doesn't come up for everything, but it's coming up more and more frequently now as the days pass. From my research in general, and like how I think about this, how it impacts just content strategies in general, it's definitely making a lot of businesses who depend on web search a little bit anxious, right? And a lot of news publishers, which are Google's largest clients, are kind of throwing a lot of mixed bag opinions around it, right? It can be, catastrophic for certain industries, et cetera, et cetera. So I think, let's start here.
I'm curious, Rodolfo, to kind of what is Google hoping here from like a user experience, right? Like, is this a Perplexity like competitor where you do your search, they give you their sources, but like you don't actually need to go to the source material unless you like want to dive deeper, and that's why people are like a little wary and scared around this because like the idea is you ask the search bar, the AI overview gives you your answer, and then you never dive into a link.
Yeah, I think, well, there's a lot of things how to answer that question. One, even with Perplexity, I think it all kind of roots down to, is this actually like a innovative response from Google, or is it a reaction from Google, right? Because of the competitors out there and, needing to figure out how to stick their stick on the ground first,
Man,
right?
I don't know. I don't know internally for sure, but it feels like the last like 12 months of Google has been reactionary in general.
Yeah. And I don't know, I'm not, it is not our, we can only give opinions, right? But to answer your question, I think it's interesting. Like I was listening to a couple of interviews, interviews with Sundar and also from the conference, from him, it says, he said, and I actually have this, it's not about giving an answer. There are times where you want to surface the breadth of opinions on the web, which is what search does and does it well. Just because we're summarizing it on top doesn't mean we veer from those principles, right? So it's interesting he said that, because I think like at the end of the day, he even went on to describe how that is a interesting approach to AI versus like the Chat GPTs, OpenAIs and or Cloud, where whenever you're interacting with them, they provide an answer, a single answer. This is kind of like Sundar and Google's way of saying, hey, we're providing these innovative features, but also giving the user using it the option to click through these links and kind of dig in further to do their own research. I thought that was interesting for them to say and go that route.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. and I've listened to a couple of interviews from Sundar as well, and his responses has always or has lately been, we are experimenting, right? We're trying things. He brings things up where, like, Google was not the first search engine, right? They have become the go-to search engine, right? There were many before them, and they've, I guess, come out on top to be the best. So he kind of answers that question of, like, look, we're at the very beginning stages of this, and we're experimenting, as everyone kind of is. um, I think it's a really good response from the CEO, but I do kind of get a sense, of, like, I wonder if, other companies have been pushing them faster than they were expecting to, to kind of put some of the stuff up front. And just to kind of paint a picture too for people, like, you search a thing, like, for example, if you say what's the most popular coffee, right now, that is producing an AI overview for me. I think everybody's kind of, whether they serve one or not, I think is still kind of, they're playing with that, but it gives you kind of a real quick summary. But they also put, a couple of links to, like, I guess, their sources, right, or things that they are could be considered sources. I think, you know people have asked, Sundar this as well. So, like, how does this affect, their core business, right? So, like, their core business is ads, right? So, in that same example, I'm given four different sources, four links, right? And so I'm sure there's a world where, those might be sponsored links. They there might actually be ads in there. I don't know how they're actually going to, like, do that, but
I'm
it's
curious if we're getting this. I asked the same thing, and I got
yeah.
an AI overview. What are your, like? Are we getting the same links?
Yeah, so I my first is Coffeeness, the most popular drinks.
Yep.
Then I have Detach Coffee,
Yep.
wincoffeesupply.com, tasteofhome.com.
Yeah. So it's the
Um,
same for me. Interesting.
but what's interesting is, like, the 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 normal, like, very first, organic link is the Coffeeness one. So that's also the one that they put in there, right? And so if you scroll down just a tiny bit, you're going to see that first link. But the other ones in that list are not, like, they don't go in order. Like, I don't even see those on the first page of Google, which is kind of interesting. So,
Which brings up, like, the question of, like, how this impacts operators and stuff, right? Is
right.
like, if you've been working on search engine ranking and you've been ranking, really high above the fold, although we know that the fold is like a continuous scroll these days, but that changes it, right? Because now they're using a different algorithm to showcase the top four sources that they're pulling from.
Right. And that's incredibly valuable, uh, real estate. And it's interesting because, like, I don't see anywhere on this page specifically, I don't see anywhere where there are ads. Like, there's not any sponsored, uh, you usually when you Google something, like, your first, like, four things are an ad, right? And then you kind of go down to the organic results. So I don't see any ads, which is really interesting to me. So that just might be part of their experimentation, but I don't know how they're going to start implementing that.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Like if you really think about it and dig in, like I believe this is correct, but over 63% of organic search happens on Google of like the entire web. Um, so I get why a lot of people are scared. Like you guys are saying, it is going to be a fundamental shift if they, double down on this, at which, I think they already have. Um, but it's really interesting. I'm kind of excited for it too. Um, it it's kind of like setting the stage to think about, um, like whenever I was watching and listening to the interviews. I think my biggest wow moment was, whenever you ask that question, right? And I think there was another interview where they asked Sundar's like, uh, how AI search or overviews didn't provide an answer to the question, what is the best Chromebook, right? It just provided a snippet with links to go and kind of do your further research. It's just interesting to me because right now they're kind of teetering between, do we go full out and actually use overviews to provide an answer, or are we do we need to balance this? Kind of with great power comes great responsibility. Your favorite quote, Mason. Um, between publishers, right? Because they are at the end of the day they're clients, they're customers, and so I think Google can't afford to become going from a search engine to like a single answer engine. Um, where they still need to think about this in a way where publishers, the customers, us, are still leveraging their platform, their ads platform, which is their biggest source of revenue. Um, still get traffic, still get incentivized that knowing that we're going to get traffic, etc. So it's just interesting. I mean, like
Yeah, I want to get into like,
I was just going to ask real quick, like it kind of made me think about like, do you guys think it's better for like whatever a search platform to provide like a single answer or to provide the user a choice
yeah, I
to
was
kind
gonna
of
say I
dig
want to
in
get
and
into like how like keyword like optimization and then like content marketing in general like it gets adopted, but like it's really interesting. So like the coffee response, I did get an AI overview. I went and asked like two FAQ self-storage related questions in the search bar and didn't get them. So like, what size do I need to store a two-bedroom apartment? Do I need a climate controlled unit to store furniture, right? And neither one of those got an AI overview, which is interesting, right? Um, to answer your question directly, Rodolfo, like I think you turned me on to Perplexity, a couple months ago, and I've even like programmed my action button on my iPhone 15 to go directly to Perplexity's like voice, and I use that all the time now.
nice.
Um, and I think that's like part of these things becoming better at doing what it is, and like their omnipresence of being kind of top of mind. That like every time I'm out at like a dinner or like hanging out or something, somebody asks a question, it's like, well, just go ask Perplexity, hold down the action button. How big is this stadium? How many people does it hold, etc. And I love the single response that Perplexity gives you, which is similar to the AI overview. And then, kind of those like follow-on questions and sources kind of make me feel really nice, but I don't ever really like click through.
What I think is interesting is that uh, Rodolfo, you called it a search engine, which is what we've always called it, right? A search engine. I don't think people necessarily want to search for a website to go find an answer, right? I think that's how it's been for a long time because that's the technology we had. People are searching for an answer, right? Like you asked a question, and some of the interviews I've watched with Sundar, Sundar as well have, he has commented on how behaviors have changed. People have been asking more and more. They just straight up ask a question, right? Like for like the example I just did, what's the most popular coffee? Mason said, "What size do I need to store a two-bedroom?" Right? And then, before any of this stuff, Google would, kind of keyword match and like pull some links together they think that are relevant, right? And it's on you to kind of go find the answer. But I think like people don't want to do that necessarily. And if I can just ask a question, like their their goal is to get the stuff answered. And so I think like Google's going to have to figure this out because we're also seeing like other things like whole browsers that are like I use the Arc browser ARC on mobile. It's really good. Like you just go ask it a question and it basically does what they call like it puts together your own custom website and it's pulling links from everywhere, right? Not just Google. Like it gives you like summaries and then you can dive deeper, which I think is nice. So it's like it's this weird like way of like it kind of presents a bunch of information to you, and then you can decide, hey, this is an interesting thing. I want to go down this path. And then you tap that, and it kind of opens this whole new world with more contextual information. And if you want, you can just continue to like get AI summaries that are basically answers, high level. But if you want more information, then you go deeper into like links and you read like what a website has to say about it. And I wonder if that's kind of like where Google's headed or like what they need to do. But again, the question I have is like, how do they monetize it? Because like 80% of the revenue is ads.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's crazy. The your comment about like consumer uh, search trend or search habits is an interesting one. Like, right? I mean, forever Google's had a fill in lucky button, right? A one click to web page button. I don't know that I've ever used that. Um,
I've tried it
right.
just to see what it does, but I'm like, I don't know if this is valuable.
And then I remember like reading a book recently called AI Superpowers, and like one of the author like used to work at Google, also like tried to like run like Google International, and like one of the things that like stood out to me was just like search uh, habits between like North American consumers and like Chinese consumers. Like, you know, in I forget which, if it's, I think in the United States, like consumers have like the habit is to do the search, open these things in like four or five different tabs, and then like go from one tab to another, kind of like checking information. Whereas like in China, like you click one link and that's it, right? And so it's interesting that these things are changing habits on a global scale uh, in general. And I'm sure, to your point that you made earlier, Kyle, it's like we're just at the very earliest stage of them experimenting with this. It's going to be really cool to see how it like changes, you know, in real time.
Yeah, I mean, actually, before I continue down my thought process, Kyle, is that part of the browsing company, that Arc
Yep.
cert?
Yep. Yep.
Nice,
It's
nice.
it's really cool, but I will say, like, they raised some money. They have not figured out how to monetize it. Like, I would pay maybe $5-10 a month for what they offer,
Have
but
you
they
used
haven't
their
started
browser?
charging for it. What?
Have you used their browser?
Okay, I feel like their browser on desktop is just fine. I don't love it. I
Yeah.
just use it on mobile because they only have this like AI search thing on the mobile app, and so I
I
use
haven't
it
tried
there.
the mobile app. Cool.
Yeah,
I
like,
have
and
to look it up.
I've actually, it's funny, like when I'm on the go, I've replaced it, instead of googling something, I use Arc. I'll just ask it the question, and
Nice.
it gives me, like, for instance, like when we were in DC a couple months ago, I was curious about the architecture. Like, we were staying in that really cool
Yeah.
Airbnb.
Yeah.
I was like, man, tell me about the architecture here, and I went down this huge rabbit hole. It was really cool.
Nice. Is it similar to Perplexity?
I haven't
Or
used Perplexity that much,
okay,
but
I'll have to try it out.
probably, and they just
Anyway,
kind of made it like it. It's nice that it's like part of the browser, because if you just want to do a regular Google search or just go to a website, you can do that too. But you
yeah,
can also, they call it browse for me. So if you type a question or search, you hit that button instead of just a regular search, and
got
it
it.
builds what they call their custom web page for you.
Nice.
And
Um,
we can cut all the stuff out too if we want.
it's fine. People like to hear it. Cool. So going back to it, I think you mentioned something, Mason, that made me bring something up that I was looking at last week. This is a little bit old now because I feel like AI news and everything related to the big companies changes on like a weekly basis now. But this is back from April, end of April. Um, a publisher I like to follow just to keep up to date with everything search, called Search Engine Journal, had a really neat in-depth guide where they essentially ranked how SGE, now AI overview, uh, was kind of like was querying and when it was triggered, etc. So they analyzed over 500,000 queries to find patterns and triggers that would result in a snippet, essentially, right? And SGE has been a thing for a while. They've been experimenting it since probably June 2023, so like a year ago. But it was interesting where they found that the top verticals, right, with an SGE answer ranked. So top five are beauty with 94%, automotive with 93 to 94, marketplace with 90, and e-commerce with 86. And it keeps ranking down. There's e-commerce, HR, entertainment, real estate, and hotels are closer to 80%, which is interesting, right? So it seems like over this past year, Google itself has been experimenting and rolling this out, knowing that would have different impacts on, depending on the vertical. Um, and it's just interesting how they kind of started going after a lot of like the type of e-commerce type things, consumer type products, and then making their way down to a lot of these other verticals. But it's just interesting to think about in verticals versus directly only related to keywords and kind of search ranking.
You know, the two things that I think about when I think about search engine is keyword, you know, optimization, you know, like sitting there making sure that you're building, and then just like content marketing in general. So I'm curious, like, kind of, Rodolfo, this is your area. Like, what's going to happen? Like, how should operators think about this? How should we think about this when we're thinking about optimizing our, SEO, etc.?
Damn, putting me in the spot.
Heck yeah, man, that's your job.
No, I have okay. So it definitely means that a lot of people have to brace for fewer clicks to your website, right, and to your content. Um, like I said before, I'm optimistic, but it's definitely going to be like a fun challenge, right, to think about and get used to. And we're talking about search. We haven't even touched on like all the hoopla on AI agents, which we can touch on later if we can. But I think my advice, how I'm thinking about our content, and my advice on how to start preparing. First, pretty easy. Start segmenting your organic content. Your organic channels, what content is attracting the most organic traffic. Maybe categorize it into different buckets, right? Informational, educational, I don't know, announcements, uh, transactional for us, like product updates, etc. Then look at how much within those buckets.
And just to define this, organic traffic is something where somebody's like directly coming to a specific URL,
No,
not
no.
through a
So
search engine.
no. So organic is what we need to focus on, which is kind of what AI overviews is impacting. Direct is when somebody clicks directly on URL, and they're looking for Tri Swivel. They're looking for you know Apple, and they go directly there. Organic is like through a keyword or whatnot. That's where like a lot of SEO is. You're investing that money in SEO because you're pushing out content to attract people from queries and long term keywords, etc. So that's where I think that's what's gonna be impacted, right? And so whenever you're thinking about that, by being able to kind of understand that informational educational bucket, which is the one that's going to have the highest search, that's the traffic at risk, right? And I think from us, a way to beef up this type of content will come down to one. I think thought leadership is going to be essential going forward. At the end of the day, like Google is summarizing answers to questions using their AI algorithms to be at the top of search. So you need to start looking at ways to essentially make your content stand out. There's a huge opportunity to provide nuance and professional opinions based on your individual experience. And so I think doing that plus the backing of using data to back up your answers is going to be huge. I think Google and even just consumer trends, how people search, they're always looking for data, right? I think
Get nerdy
too.
on them. Add
Yeah, I
those
think
numbers in there.
I think too at the end of the day, you will have right now we will have to experiment with how we tweak the structure and format of our blogs moving forward. I think to Kyle's point, like people want answers, so it's just like how do you make sure that stuff is prominent, right? Um, because we still don't know. Like we can make how many assumptions can we make, right? At the end of the day, Google might in 3 months say, well, we're actually going this other direction. We need to learn how to maneuver that. But I think again, thought leadership, um, making sure that you're putting that content first, playing with the structure and format, and also one last thing, and I'll shut up, is I think this might also mean that we're going to have to figure out how to close the loop um, to ensure that our brand and your brand is still out there in the forefront of people's minds whenever they're searching. And you have to think about other channels that are not search, they're not Google, and what are those, right? Right now, like the channel that attracts a lot of eyeballs is social media, right? And that kind of goes hand in hand with my opinion on like thought leadership, right? If you want to track eyeballs, like we're gonna have to experiment with that stuff. Um, they're gonna have their own algorithms going too, so we're gonna have to learn and play by their rules. But I think investing in other channels like that, I think it's gonna be huge. So that's That's my opinion.
Yeah, the way I've been thinking about it is like, imagine you have this huge library. It's full of books. The old way of kind of doing things was like, look, I write these articles, I write these things about my business, and they're inside this book. And when someone went to Google, they would search. Google would go grab that book off the shelf, hand them the book, and then that's where they're reading the information. The new way of doing things, I view it like when you come to Google and say, "Hey, is Hoover Properties a good place for me to store my stuff?" Instead of going to grab that book off the shelf and giving it to you, they're saying, "Here, this is what I read in the book that Hoover Properties wrote." And so to kind of echo what Rodolfo was saying, it's like it's almost like it doesn't really matter what source the information is coming from that's in that book, right? Like the old way was like, look, I'm going to write these blog posts. It's on my website. It's a channel that I control because I know that like people are going to that site. If they're not doing that anymore, I think it's important to, you know, like he was saying, like you have to expand your reach to all the channels. And as an example, like Reddit recently has been licensing all of their data to like OpenAI and probably Google at this point. Although Google has all the information because they're a search engine. Then
Google already paid
they crawl it, yeah,
60 billion for that. So
yeah, and so and it's which is interesting because like there's a there's an aside we can go on because like one of the there recently Google had some kind of mishaps with their AI overview stuff where like someone was asking about it's a ridiculous question, but they were like asking like how does the cheese on my pizza not fall off whatever, and they answered it like very like you're like okay this makes sense, they're like mixing some cheese in the
add some
sauce.
glue.
Well, yeah, well, at first they were like mixing some cheese in the sauce helps and whatever. And then they said you can also add about an eighth a cup of non-toxic glue to the sauce to give it more tackiness, which is like just hilarious.
Ghetto Elmer's.
Yeah. But what's funny is that like there's this if you go deep into this, there's this Reddit thread of of this person saying, to fight AI, I think the best course of action is to shitpost. It can't be helpful if we as humans corrupt it. And like,
that's hilarious.
That is too funny.
And then like there's a Reddit post that's almost exactly what that thing says. To get the cheese to stick, I recommend about an eighth a cup of Elmer's glue, blah, blah, blah. I like Elmer's glue, but any glue will work as long as it's non-toxic. So like, I am assuming that that's part of the data that they license. Like maybe it is, maybe it isn't. It's just like
there's no way for them to, I mean, how are they going to distinguish that stuff?
Right. Right. Exactly.
That is such a Reddit hive mind thing to do, but
it is. It's so funny. Cause like when I'm on Reddit, sometimes I'm like, man, I don't know what to believe. Like people are just putting stuff out there. Like it's like they know what they're talking about,
I mean, this is like our well, first of all, I really like your like book analogy. I think that's like, it really paints a picture, and it made me think of, when we were going through the like what coffee is the best thing, like maybe it becomes like brand equity that you're really trying to gain in a lot of those things, right? Because we saw those logos sitting in there. And so even though I didn't click through, I saw the logo. I had a brand touch point with that logo. And like in the self-storage industry, that's probably really important. If I'm asking the question about, size of a unit that I need, or do I need a climate control or not for specific types of items that I'm storing, like seeing that logo is a brand touch point for me, which is interesting.
Hey, as a reminder, we don't do ads, and we don't plan on doing them. But I do want to take a second to tell you about our newsletter called Lab Notes. It's a weekly newsletter where we share some of our thoughts as well as links to articles and other content that we collect from the web. We'll leave a link in the show notes. You can always sign up on our website, tryswivel.com, and we hope you enjoy it. Now back to the show.
I really want to quickly touch on the hallucination piece of the puzzle too, because I think all these big companies, they're moving so quick. OpenAI, Google, Microsoft, we've talked about this in other podcasts specific around this kind of topic. All of them are adding that tiny gray font to the bottom now, right? That says, check responses for accuracy, or, ChatGPT can make mistakes, check important information. I think that's like really something, as somebody that, cares about accuracy in a business sense. You can't give away a free plane, sell all the tickets for $0, or, tell somebody they don't have an account balance when they have an account balance at a self-storage facility. these things are. I don't think that we ever get away from hallucinations, right? Like most AI researchers today are saying that we're going to try to eliminate them as much as possible, but like humans naturally hallucinate. The source of information is naturally hallucinate. And I don't mean that we hallucinate. We exaggerate the truth. We make up the truth. And so these machines that we're building in our image are going to have similar problems forever. Which is just an interesting point to make, that all these things,
For
every single
sure.
one of OpenAI,
Yeah.
Google,
It's
all
a
of their
feature, not a
keynotes
bug.
have that. Yeah, all of their keynotes. So like
Yeah.
every slide that Google introduced at Google I.O. like had the little gray font that was like, this is an AI tool, like check responsibly, instead of drink responsibly, check your sources responsibly is like the new thing.
Yeah, I mean, man. Yeah, it just like all this makes me think, I am really kind of not 100% sure like where this is all going. Because it is like we've all echoed kind of like a fundamental shift if you think about it. Um, adding that Kyle from like Reddit and whatever. I mean, shoot, if they're scraping content from everywhere, even The Onion, right? So what you know, you guys all know what The Onion is, so it's just like ridiculous articles that sound like they're real. So I'm sure all that is going to the hallucination bucket, but it's just interesting to kind of even going further into search how even some of the demos I can say Google I.O, and even we haven't even touched on OpenAI, and they're like multimodal models. I think this happened to me last time I talked about this. But it's funny how like the shift now is like from going from like search to like taking actions for people. Um, and like right now, knowledge is just getting more and more commoditized, which is interesting. Like it's at the tip of your fingertips. And I think right now, marketers, product marketers, or just in general, product people, etc., you have to start thinking about how to essentially better serve the content that you're providing to your audience, to your customers, in a way that is easily consumable by these robots. And it just makes me think like, you know, how and what do you think this interface will look like? Like I'll stop here, but like I saw this other video of we've been talking this whole time about search and like keywords and all that, and like how to optimize your content. But there's also this other video of somebody taking a video of their broken record player. They searched with the video on Google, and an overview snippet showed up. No words. Um, so that's also being taken into place, right? Vision coming into place here. Like, it's funny because it's like, oh, Google, you're disrupting your favorite child, YouTube. I use YouTube all the time to get knowledge whenever I'm trying to do something in my car or whatnot. So it's just like it's interesting. It's not just written content. So just my mind goes on and wanders about like what that interface is going to look like.
Yeah, I'm not sure what it's going to look like, but I mean, I think it goes back to like what I was saying earlier about like people they're searching for an answer, not like a chore necessarily. It's like I think like I want to like go to a quote unquote expert. I want to ask you about this thing because you know all the information. Now, how I do that, I think is changing, right? Like you said. So like maybe I type it, maybe I use voice. The vision thing is wild. Like there's examples, kind of like you said, like you hold up your camera phone, your phone camera, and you just point at something.
Sorry, dude, you're showing your age.
I
Your
know, dude.
camera.
I don't. I'm gonna cut that part out. but like and you just point at it and you just say, like, you can say, what is this, or not even do that, and it just starts telling you what it sees, and maybe what's wrong with it, like that thing is nuts. And I equate it to, again, like, an expert, or someone that knows something about it, like, hey, come over here and look at this, like, with the record player, like, oh, all you need to do is just plug that thing, those four wires into the needle, and they're actually backwards, or something like that, right? Like, that is so nuts to me. But I think it's a good kind of segue to just quickly touch on, like, we're seeing a lot of, or not a lot of, but a few of these, like, hardware companies that are also AI software companies, right? So we've got, like, the Rabbit R1, we've got the Humane AI pin, and it's interesting because they have they're coming at it from a, like, hey, you need to buy this hardware, like this piece of hardware. It could be $200 for the Rabbit R1, $800, I think, for the Humane AI pin. The Humane has like a $24 a month, like, service fee or whatever. And it's like, it's interesting because they're thinking about this in a cool way of, like, look, I put this thing, like this pin, on my shirt. It can see the world around me. It can react. If I just ask it things, it can answer those questions for me. Um, but the thing that I keep questioning is, like, why do I need this extra piece of hardware when, like, the reality is, like, the powerful piece is in the hardware. Sorry, in the software. And as an example, like, we all have really powerful iPhones or Androids in our pocket, and really, it's like we just need software running on those pieces of hardware. Just like Mason said, he has Perplexity, tied to his shortcut,
The action button.
action button. Thank you. Right. So, like, I don't know. It's like, I think it's kind of early on in this. I personally don't think that like, I need to go buy another piece of hardware when I already have one. Um, but it'll be interesting to kind of see what happens there.
Yes, I mean, I have a lot of opinions here. I have three of the, say 5 or 6 new devices, right? I'm counting the Apple Vision Pro as one of those because although it doesn't have like an AI model today, I think expectations is that, I mean, there's 9 external facing cameras. This thing literally is telling me exactly what I'm seeing in the world around me that's going to come there. I've got the Rabbit R1, and I have the Meta Ray-Bans, Facebook's Meta Ray-Ban glasses that have Llama 3 now built into them. And like the Rabbit R1 is like a replacement for my phone is, I'm just going to be blunt, is stupid. Like I played with it for all of 2 hours. I charged it up. I went through the process of connecting it to my Wi-Fi and the whole 9 yards, and then like for 2 hours, I was like, okay, let me see what I can do with it. And then I was bored with it because I'm like, I just want to pull my phone out. My phone does everything that it can do and more. And I like would take the R1 and like just hold it to my Apple Watch Ultra and be like, I'm already wearing this thing anyway. Right. Now, granted, Apple hasn't turned on like a true AI assistant, um, which we can rapid fire. We're in dev season. So like WWDC is in a couple weeks. Expectations that Apple's going to announce a lot of AI focused, features. But really the profound moment that I had with these devices today, I have a ton of them with my Apple Vision Pro, but that's not what today's about, is the Meta Ray-Bans. Like, I wasn't ready for how much I enjoyed that experience. And I think the thing that I really enjoyed, it's the difference between having to bring an extra piece of hardware. And like, I put on the glasses because I wanted to wear sunglasses. And it just so happened that those sunglasses now could take photos and see the world around me. Right. And I think that was like really profound for me, is like, I was like, even when they die, like the battery dies on them, I still wear those glasses because they're just nice sunglasses. But when they're charged, the feature set of like knowing that I hate doing this, but be like, hey, Facebook, what am I looking at? Or hey, Facebook, like ask the question. I don't have to take anything out of my pocket. I don't have to do anything there. It's like, I was like really shocked by the experience that I had with that. And so like, I don't think that the R1, the humane AI pen, the AI pendant, like all these kind of extra things are going to replace the smartphone in our pocket. Glasses, watches, even AirPods are really interesting wearables that today provide a lot of functionality that we already use, that when you start to add these large language pre-trained transformer models onto them, they do more, right? And some of the things that we talk about, like even OpenAI, we haven't talked about this, but like, I could ask you guys what your favorite demo was. Most of those things, we've talked about this in one of our initial like ChatGPT launch things. Most of these are parlor tricks. Having two AIs sing a lullaby song to each other is a parlor trick. Like it's cute, it's cool. Maybe like your kid can be creative because it's like telling a bedtime story and all that kind of stuff, but like it's not doing real work. When Apple and Google introduce, I mean, I know Google does this a little bit already, but like say generative models into the Photos app to help me adjust my photography and make me a better photographer, now we're talking. Like that is really what I want, right? Like I want to be able to take a picture, say using my Meta Ray-Bans or some other pair of glasses. I want to go to my digital screen, my iPhone, my iPad, and I want to say, man, I really love the pink in the night sky tonight. Can you highlight the pink a little bit more for me? And, I don't have to worry about the edit of that piece of the photo. It does that edit for me. Maybe it gives me a couple of different options and I can select it, or it asks me back and forth, about that edit. And now I've got a better photo. Or, take people that have kids or, loved ones, and you're doing something very similar with the kid or the loved one, right? Like all these things have really powerful bokeh that most people don't utilize. So you take that picture of your little kid at their birthday and you say, hey, it's his birthday. I want to highlight this. And, the strangers in the background at Disney World, like blur them out a little bit more. And it does that bokeh really nicely for you, frames it, crops it, does the whole 9 yards. And now we're talking about some really powerful stuff. Bringing that back to self-storage before I stop my rant is like, imagine doing that same thing and asking the question that I asked Google, where you say you're looking at a piece of furniture or a painting or something in your house or boxes because you're about to move, and asking it how much, storage space you need, and it giving you the answer, it, texting you or opening up an app on your phone so that you can go and reserve the unit, etc. Like that's a really cool, like you actually solved something for me. It's not the two AI singing together parlor trick.
Yeah, that's huge. I didn't want to interrupt you because I just want to say, did we just hear Mason fanboy over Meta? Like
Man, you don't
that's
understand how
wild.
hard that is for
That's
me.
wild.
You really don't. Like
I
it,
bet that hurt your soul.
but I really do like my Meta Ray-Bans. I would pay 4x for an Apple version, but like, here we are.
Well, you kind of did, and it even has more functionality, right?
Yeah, but I'm not wearing my Apple Vision Pros to like go hike.
Yeah,
Like,
true. True.
I'm not
True,
doing
yeah.
that.
Yeah, but I think it's a good point, Mason, because one thing that like the Rabbit R1's trying to do, and humane AI pin, like they talk about a lot about this large action model, right? And for like stringing a bunch of things together to like do an action to like actually solve a problem, right? It's one thing to like ask a question, and going back to like to the Google search thing, like, hey, like what's the best size storage unit for a 2-bedroom apartment, right? It can tell you that, right? It might be able to like summarize, well, based on all these books I've read, this is what I would recommend. But it's something even further to be like, okay, cool, you know what, go ahead and book me one for July 1st with extra space, and
Look for the best discount.
yeah,
Yeah.
right, like whatever, like something kind of crazy. So like, I think that's the interesting part, I think. And like, again, I think it all kind of comes down to software. You can do that without needing a specific piece of hardware, but I think the biggest challenge is like a lot of these things that they're trying to do don't have like an API, right? So it's like, hey, I'm going to go find the 10 by 10 unit. I'm going to go rent it at this specific operator. Here's my personal, information. I'm going to sign the lease, et cetera, right? Like
But
all of
the
that, like,
interface on the web has like it should have very clear structuring, right? Like those divs should be
Mhm.
clearly structured with what it's showing on a website from your website developer.
It should, but I think I would argue a lot of people don't have that set up properly, right?
Well, there's gonna be a wave of hurt to some people.
Oh, for sure, for sure. And but this idea of like doing all these actions that a human normally does, but like doing it like in the background with some AI model is kind of wild. But I think to Mason, to your point, like as this progresses, if this becomes more of a thing, like we're going to have to be ready for like, is our website set up so that these things can go do that? Is it simple for the not only for the human to read, but the computer needs to be able to read it and understand it, right? Is all your information correct, etc.
Yeah, it kind of goes back to like a way of like the whole team needing to think about how like I was saying, like how do you feed that content to robots? And we should have done this probably prior. We might have gotten too excited, but just want to make a quick point.
Hey,
Um,
we started a nerdy topic. You can't
yeah,
expect some
I know,
nerds to just nerd out for a
I
half
know,
second.
but just
I
want
did
to take
good with my like maybe 5 minute diatribe around the Apple Vision Pro and the Meta Quest or Meta Ray-Ban.
yeah, check. We talked about it. I do want to take a step back though and kind of just uh, I guess even the playing field real quick, just so people understand. So what we're seeing now, right? A lot of conversations around, ChatGPT or Gemini by Google or Claude, right? They're all what you would probably consider a copilot, Microsoft Copilot, right? Which essentially you use, a lot of people are using to generate content. I don't know, figure out what research you have to do. You can ask follow up questions, and they'll give you an answer. Yada yada, right? It's like a step by step process. You can definitely train things like, create your own GPT and all that. But what Kyle and Mason have been talking about now are what people are considering agents, right? Which you're giving it an action and it will essentially perform it for you. Kind of to both of y'all's point of like, hey, I need to store this whole room with 4 boxes, and do it for me. Look for the cheapest discount, etc. So it's just mind blowing that we're already getting to that point. Both Google and OpenAI have shown different, I guess, use cases like Google. I feel like there's going to be agents or whatever it'll be called, agents for different use cases. I think Google has been hanging their hats on like, obviously the overviews being like agent for search. There's one for powering your ads and creating hyper personalized variants, which I think is interesting, right? As an example, it's like not only will it help you create multiple variations at mass, one single person, but like you can have it scan your website and create ads for it and actually get pretty personalized with it. You can tell it what style you like, etc. And then it'll do that whole job for you, and essentially spit out ads that then you can run. There's probably going to be analytics agents, other all kinds of agents. Like you even asked Mason, this isn't related to storage, sorry, but you even asked around like Chat GPT and OpenAI. Like I think something that is going to be huge. One of the use cases that they showed that really, I thought had a huge impact. It wasn't perfect, but will have a huge impact. Is like a tutor. Whenever they're just showcasing um, Sam Altman, which is an OG, with his son, and just like learning out or was it geometry. Um, I thought that was so neat to be able to add that to. I think they're using an iPad and like the voice assistant work with the his son, the student, to go through and walk him through a problem and how to solve it and actually teach it. I think I'm thinking immediately of my nephews and nieces, and how essentially their educational development is going to be vastly different than ours. Um, they will be trained at such an early age on how to interact with robots in a way that I can't fathom. It's going to be like this whole new language, which to them will be so easy. And I feel like for us, we're just like trying to keep up and like obviously everything is so nascent still, but It's definitely going to be interesting to see.
Yeah, it's really cool. Just to touch on to bring that some of the OpenAI demos back to self storage. I think I kind of mentioned, or I've said this a couple times, like most of these are parlor tricks, but it did get my head thinking around different use cases. And one of the demos that they did, I think during the main keynote, not just as a video that they released afterwards, was basically they had one AI agent, one GPT, accessing a camera, talking to another GPT that didn't have access to the camera. And that made me think about security systems, right? And so, like, you could imagine some AI that doesn't have access to a camera asking an AI on a security system questions about activity that's happening at a facility, right? So, like, oh, like somebody's opening this unit. Well, have you ever seen this person before? And you can imagine this like conversation between these two GPTs going back and forth before a human gets involved. And it's like, I should actually escalate this to our security team. Let me send, Kyle a text to let them know that we think that there's an intruder, happening at, a specific unit. And so I think that was one of the really cool like demos where I was like, again, right now this is a parlor trick. It's like, oh, a lady came into the frame and it's describing the guy who's sitting at the desk. But like, if you take that out of the phone setting and go, okay, give a GPT access to any camera and allow it to talk to another, AI agent of some sense, how does that become useful in a business sense?
Yeah, that made me think of. I wish I could give them a shout out right now. I just don't remember their name, so apologies if you guys listen to this. Hit us up, and we'll include you guys. But I think I did see something in a recent show where I thought it wasn't exactly that. I think it's very possible for them to do that, right? But um, something that they were talking about was using their model to actually go through security systems and be able to search by like things that you remember. Maybe it's like, oh, I can't remember exactly, but like show me like a black Subaru and a guy with a red hat, and actually went and searched the video, and it showed you that time frame in the video, and
Kyle, you noticed how
to see the
subconsciously
playback.
Rodolfo's thinking about Subarus right now, right?
I know. I
We're
hate
trying
you
to
guys.
convert him.
I hate you guys. But I mean, they're great cars. I'll eventually get one. But but yeah, Mason, that kind of made me think of them. Apologies, I don't remember their name. I wish I could send it to you guys through the messaging, but I thought it was neat. Pretty pretty innovative, and I think this it could go so much further with everything that's going on.
All right, I think we're getting the hey, time to rapid fire some other AI news things. We've already touched on OpenAI, but like really quickly, the big announcement was GPT 4.0. Um, reminds me of like what is it, C3PO from Star Wars with the little O.
Nice.
O stands for Omni, like with the Omni channel multimodal. Really, this is a faster iteration of GPT-4 model, allowing for the model to not only understand but generate voice, text, and images, etc.
Yeah, they also launched a Mac app. I downloaded it, but I'm not too sure yet if I'm going to install it. I'm worried about like just permissions on my computer and like data training. I have to look into that a little bit more deeper.
Yeah, I did the same thing.
Next on the list from a rapid fire was Microsoft Build. Again, it's developer season, so for people that are outside of the tech ecosphere, this is the season where all the big tech companies have their developer conferences. So Microsoft's Build conference, they introduced what they call AI PCs, or they branded them as Copilot Plus. Copilot Plus PCs, basically introducing chips into the system that have neural processing units that allow for these devices to run models locally before they have to go out. They also introduced a feature called recall, where basically the PC itself is like taking pictures of your screen every so often, and it can recall what you did in those apps, or what it was, what something had on a presentation slide that was being shown to you, etc. Um, the Copilot in Windows 11 also gets the GPT-4o model from OpenAI, so those kind of relate to each other. And then I don't know if anybody wants to go to Google. We touched on the Rabbit R1, the AI pendant, Humane AI pen, Meta Ray
Mason, I want
Bans.
to know, what are some of the Apple rumors? Like, I know you can talk forever on this, but like rapid fire, like WWDC, like what are you expecting?
So developer focused, they're the only IDE, so developer environment for, again, the non-coding people in the audience. Number one has to be like Copilot for Xcode. They're the only IDE that doesn't have some type of large language model built into Xcode. So I think that has to be number one. But then when we start to get previews of iOS 18, I kind of touched on it. I think photo edits is coming. I think Siri being a little bit more conversational. Just those two things alone would be a huge like win for the Apple ecosystem. But I think like suggested replies in messages and email client is going to get a big boon. And then I'm really hoping to see some really cool stuff in Notes. I'm a big power users of Notes. And so
Same.
like
Yeah,
AI and Notes would be huge. Like, give
that'd
me
be huge.
something where I can do some cool stuff there. That would be really cool. If they do that, like, huge win for Apple and Apple ecosystem fanboys from there. What they do in the Vision Pro is going to be really interesting to see if some of those AI features come to the Vision Pro. And then just today, I mean, there's been like 3 weeks of rumors, but just today, we're recording at the end of May. You know, the rumor is that OpenAI did ink a deal with Apple. And so I'm assuming that if you want a chat experience or you ask a question to Siri that Siri isn't necessarily able to respond to, it's going to default to, you know, OpenAI of some sort, which is, again, like, you talk about scale. I mean,
Interesting. Yeah.
that
Yeah.
is crazy scale
Yeah. Wow.
overnight for OpenAI. And, you know, no longer is my action button on my iPhone 15, soon to be iPhone 16 in September, going to be programmed to, you know, Perplexity. It's going directly to whatever this thing is. So that's kind of cool.
Nice.
I think that's my bingo card for WWDC
Nice.
in a week or two.
Yeah. Well, after a couple of weeks, maybe we'll have to do an episode, depending on what they announce. Maybe we'll have to dive into it. The one thing I wanted to touch on was like, what the heck has Elon Musk been up to? Like, you know, he was very involved in OpenAI originally. You know, it was like called OpenAI because it was kind of like a, I don't know, what you would call that, kind of like a co-op kind of thing. Like, hey, AI should be safe and whatever for everyone. It has moved into, we've got this awesome thing where this, you know, for-profit company thing now, and you know, so he kind of stepped back from that. And what's his thing called? Grok is what he launched.
Yeah, I refuse to call it X. So on Twitter, they have Gronk or Grok.
Yeah. XAI kind of sounds, I don't know. So, but yeah, he's over there doing that.
And they raised $6 billion for that from pretty big names: Sequoia, Anderson Horowitz, probably some Saudi Arabian prince. I'm not saying probably from Saudi Arabian prince he got money from. So a lot of money being floated around here. It's obviously a really interesting space.
Well, I feel like this is a good one. You know, we can talk for hours on this stuff, but maybe we should just make it more of a habit to just talk more often, you know, about this stuff. So I think people are really enjoying these conversations we're having.
Yeah, a little bit of a sidestep away from the regular self-storage programming, but trying to relate this stuff back to the industry as a whole too. So it's fun to geek out with everybody.
Yep. And so as always, thanks for listening. If you have questions or comments or concerns, or you want to be a caller, we'll have you on the podcast. But reach out, let us know. You can always find more information at selfstoragelab.com. Until next time, thanks for listening.